Achtung, it's a random Monday night. That must mean we have ways of making you talk. Livecast. Jim, how are you? How the devil are you?
Well, do you know what? I'm wet.
Really? Oh,
all I can say is thank God it didn't happen last week. Thank God it didn't happen last Thursday when we were having the match to beat all matches. Chalk Valley Cricket Club versus the Independent 11. Yeah. Independent Company 11, rather say. Good showing by the IC.
Take us through the day. Because I unfortunately was on my way to York and I missed the action.
Well, I do so, but with a certain amount of trepidation, to be honest. I think Chalk Valley won the toss, got put into bat, scored 237. With some testing bowling from the IC. There was absolutely no question about it.
You must have put some runs up in a score of 237. It was one of the most trusty blades on the Chalk Valley team.
No, I can barely talk about it. Unfortunately, in the 4 matches of the Chalk Valley Cricket Week, I scored a massive 17 runs, including being given out LBW third ball and the last league match of the season to an absolute howler. But anyway, I'm over it. Just about.
So how did you do in the?
But anyway, so I think I got 2 against the IC. I nicked. I skied one and it got caught. But unfortunately,
did you drop a catch as well? I just
no, I didn't drop. Oh yeah, I did a step. It was quite a hard one. It was a bit of a belter. But I did get 3 wickets for none.
Did you?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I'd have sacrificed the wickets.
So you were 230. So 237 for 6, right?
It was, 6, something like that. Yeah.
And then how did the IC do in reply?
There was a lot of sportsmanship, and Ollie particularly looked fantastic.
Thanks, Steve. By the way, thank you.
But we did bowl him out for 30.
Oh,
so it was a valiant defeat by 207 runs. But the bottom line was that cricket was very much the winner because we all had a lot of fun, had delicious tea, had lots of beers afterwards. It was lovely seeing everyone. There were quite a few supporters as well.
Yeah.
The following day, Captain Suave became a step grandfather, which is very exciting.
Oh, how lovely! Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so congratulations to him.
Yeah.
So that was lovely, and we had a funny time.
Great. Well, that's fantastic.
It was really good.
And the Field Marshal Montgomery Prize for Sportsmanship, who won that?
Well, I viewed that very much as there were lots of very good. I mean, there were people sort of being called back who'd been given out wrongly and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There was a lot of cursing from Whippet. And I thought, if we were doing the kind of full ladle of irony, then that would have been quite a good one. Yeah. But actually, in the end, I decided that really, when it came down to it, it was all about. I viewed it very much like the IC, a bit like Malta, in that I felt they needed a collective award.
Okay.
So I gave it to the whole IC for their heroic batting.
Well, that's wonderful. That's not a patronising gesture. I think that's very sweet.
It wasn't meant to be patronising.
No, of course not. No, of course not. I was on my way to York. Derek, I think, came to see us in York. Thanks very much for coming. We had a lot of fun in York.
Yeah, you've been busy up there, haven't you? Because you've had a 3 on the trot, didn't you?
Yeah. No, 4. So we did York, York, Harrogate, Stockton on Tees, and the lovely new, the amazing new Radders was sat at the front at Stockton on Tees.
No,
and I walked out and I thought, oh, there he is. I can't possibly take the piss because he's IC. He's got a free pass for sitting at the front, but I did throw a whole pint of lager over him. So
did you?
That's my introduction.
Did he take it like a man?
He took it entirely manfully. Yes, it was very, very impressive.
Of course he did.
And then we were in Salford last night. So we've been pretty busy, and all shows have been fantastic. Yes, Richard, the new theatre in Stockton is the Globe, and it's a cinema, an Art Deco cinema they've done it, and it's absolutely brand spanking new, and it's lovely to play. It's really, really special. So I went to the York, what they call the York Army Museum next to the castle in York, which is Royal Dragoons.
You liked that, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Royal Dragoons, Inniskillings, all that sort of stuff. And you come in, and immediately there's a wall-sized cutout, cross-section diagram of a Sherman with 5 people in it,
Oh,
and
I'm there.
the loader like this, proffering
Yeah.
proffering
No, that's very
around to the
Yeah.
and a thing saying, although outclassed by German tanks. And I was thinking, well, if you want, you could say that if you want. But anyway, it's very, very good, and it is. Waitman, I didn't go and see the largest piece of fossilized shit in York because I've seen it before. With
the accompanying smell and all that.
Except they call it a coprolite in order to make it sound academic rather than turd.
But they'd have to put a health warning on it otherwise.
Exactly. But but it's
you
very
might be
well
shocked by this item.
It's very well presented. Yes, you may feel unsafe. It's very well presented. The museum, and it's a proper regimental history from 1685 all the way through. When the army has to pick a side in 1688 and all that sort of stuff. It's really very, very, very well presented, and an excellent array of weapons and helmets and all. What's interesting, all presented in a chronological. All the body armor includes breastplates for cavalrymen, and then shows you compares that to the modern body armor, the Osprey, and all that sort of stuff, and then an amazing amount of really, really great footage, because obviously it's the York Army Museum. It's a broad enough. It's a lot like Soldiers of Oxford or any of the sort of more localized. These more
Green Howards there.
Yeah, Green Howards. You had Royal Dragoons, all sorts of people. They used to wear armor, Waitman. Cavalrymen used to wear armor. Not great
Back
big giant self-propelled pieces of armor. And it was
a different type of armor.
Different type of armor. The really, really amazing footage, incredible footage of one of the Yorkshire infantry battalions in Burma, where you really got a sense of they're going up some road past totally smashed up stuff, and you can get the sense of the wet and the heat and all that.
Yeah.
And in 45, so there's tanks present and all that sort of thing. But it's the sort of when they're really kind of on the rampage, 14th Army by that point, and it really, 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 really good presentation with people's voices. No, there weren't any models in the gift shop, Simon. No, it wasn't. It wasn't so good for that. But I did manage to. In York, I visited the 2 model shops in York.
Did you?
Well,
I bought.
Well, I had to buy more crew for this.
Where's Simon? Where's Simon's shop?
Here's his Northeastern Models, which is near Sunderland, or near Barnard Castle, rather. Which I think he's dragged Waitman to on one occasion. Not that Waitman
really
took any dragging, but because I had to buy more crew because the project rolls on, and we have a photo of one of my current works in progress. I think if you want to have a look, we've got a little glance of some model making. I think that the team have for us. John,
also just want to show you my mug.
Yeah, because it's all about the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry. I don't know if that photo is going to
I honestly, can I just say, I'm so happy about this. The whole project, the whole Sherwood Rangerness of it. I just think it's completely and utterly brilliant. I'm so thrilled. I'm hugely grateful to you. I'm hugely grateful to Simon.
It's Simon.
I just think it's so thrilling. I really do, and I'm sure all the Sherwood Rangers fraternity are over the moon as well.
Yeah, I mean it seems currently it seems a little absurd, but we're sorting out the smoke launchers, the radio, the stowage box on the back of the turret that they had, and trying to figure out what to do about the decals and masks as well, because the masks are all the masks are the big thing you need for the White Stars. You can't be bothered with the decals for those; they're a complete pain in the ass. You need a mask for spraying or painting.
I also do need to have a look at that list I've got of serial numbers and
but we're going. The agreement has been. The idea is you can cover a serial number with stowage quite easily, or with camo netting, or whatever. And the idea is to.
All right, so you don't need those.
Don't have to have them. We don't have to have them. One of them will need.
Well, why don't we use the ones that we know existed and put those on and have the stowage so that you can't. We don't want Simon tearing.
We don't want Simon tearing his hair out. I think we've kind of figured out what we're going to do.
Well, I think it's only right that Simon should have a killer because he's organised it all.
Yeah. I'd say that's probably. I think he already bags it anyway. But
Quite
yeah,
right too.
yeah, we've got to do the deck that you can have the show. It's got to have the Sherwood Rangers. You know, it's got to have the Brigade, Fox's Head, and 996. That's what it's got to have on it. The rest is moot, really.
I can show you a real example if they can just put up.
Have you got a real example?
A real example, yeah, of what
Yeah.
what
Of what it
should
would
look like
what it might
on a
look
real
like
on a real
In
wartime vehicle.
1-to-1 scale, as it were.
Yeah, literally.
Oh, have we got a photo of that? I wonder.
Well, it should be one front
There
and
should
aft.
be. There should be a front and aft photo coming up shortly. Although
Imminently.
I've got one on my phone, but it's not. Oh wow! Look at that. Oh, that's pure. That's very sexy, Jim. Did you do those yourself, or did you get someone in to do it?
I had a really, really fun afternoon. I really, really loved it. It was just brilliant fun. This is a new system, which is it'll come up soon.
It'll come up. We're not worried about it.
Well, let's just keep chatting.
He's trying to fix. No photos at the moment. Trying to fix. Let's not worry about that. Yeah.
Also, I must just do a shout out for DD David Dickinson, who hadn't played for 20 years or something, or if ever, and got dragged in because IC were one short on Thursday.
Yeah.
And he came to play and then pulled his calf muscle, and so he hobbled off at the fielding. But did he let the side down with the batting?
No.
He went out.
No. He went out.
He was not withdrawing.
He did not withdraw. Excellent.
He did
Well,
not withdraw
on the
at all.
subject of no withdrawals, I've been reading my
This is very exciting.
reading my audio book today, and you've never read one of your books? You've never?
I did. I read. I think I read Dam Busters.
Right. And how was it? The experience of reading your own book?
Well, it's weird because after a while you sort of forget that it was you, and you kind of think you just read it.
Right. You see, because I went in this morning. It's like the walk to they sent a car for me. It's like the walk to the gallows. You think,
No, you're being sweetly
no, I'm not.
anxious about it.
No, you go in thinking, I'm about to be confronted by my own words. Oh God! And obviously, inevitably, you pick up a couple of sentences. You think, well, I should have done that differently. And there's the odd bit and piece and thing that's escaped the copy editor and all that, proof editor. But I mean, I'm.
Well, like getting the wrong battalion, wrong parachute battalion.
There's a wrong brigade. Actually,
Privasoli Bridge, which is what I did in Sicily.
Yeah. Like, no, not to worry. But no. And actually, I read half of it today. We really cantered through it. I got half of it done. I mean, we can talk about
I'm
it.
so with you, Lady Jane. I think it's exactly the same. I think, and also when the book finally comes in, you just think, really?
Yeah.
How on earth do you do that? Anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah. No. Well, I thought. Well, what I was thinking, what idiot wrote this? But to start with, and then actually, I was quietly pleased with it today, and I'm quietly pleased.
I'm thrilled.
Quietly pleased. I know I should have got James to read the book out of principle, as some sort of reverse back.
It would have been a great honour.
But I mean, it's so what because of the Wingate chapter is the one where you sort of think, oh God, what am I doing? Like venturing into this world. There will be signs.
I remember that chapter. It's an absolutely brilliant chapter. The whole thing. Can I just say right now? I've been lucky enough to read this, when you finished it.
In its gestation and as I've finished it, yeah.
It's really good. It is really, really good. And I'm not just saying that because you're a mate.
Thanks, Jim.
I'm saying it because it is really, really freaking good. It's you're making really good points. It's brilliantly written. It's absolutely got your stamp on it. And you're saying really interesting things. And it's a totally entertaining read and thought-provoking. And there's absolutely nothing not to like.
But what was interesting about relevant voices. You see, the first chapter has a quite a long Monty quote. So it has his infamous memo of the 23rd of November 1939, which is the horizontal refreshment memo, where which I mean actually I think it's worth it. I think it's worth reading that in full. So I'll just hold the book.
Horizontal refreshment is
I'll buy that.
Another t-shirt. There's another t-shirt, isn't it?
That is definitely another t-shirt. There's a t-shirt in that. But basically, the memo he sends out, right, about sexual health.
I'll definitely get that one.
It's completely like it's entirely anodyne. You sort of think, well, this guy's just doing his job. You know, this is a divisional commander in the British Army, 1939, just doing his job properly.
Will you do it in a sort of in a kind of slight Monty accent?
Subject: Prevention of venereal disease. Divisional 179A, 15th November 1939. List A. I am not happy about the situation regarding venereal disease in the division. Since 18th of October, the number of cases admitted to field ambulances in the divisional area totals 44. I consider that the whole question of women, VD, and so on is one which must be handled by the regimental officer, and in particular by the CO. The men must be spoken to quite openly and frankly, and the more senior the officer who speaks to them, the better. My view that is if a man wants to have a woman, let him do so by all means, but he must use his common sense and take the necessary precautions against infection. Otherwise, he becomes a casualty by his own neglect, and this is helping the enemy. I mean, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
You literally cannot argue with that.
You can't argue with that, and you'd write the same. Write the same memo now, wouldn't you? Right. Our job is to help him by providing the necessary means. He should be able to buy French letters in the unit shop, and early treatment rooms must be available for his use. As regards the ET rooms, it is no use having one room in the battalion area. There should be one room in each company area. The man who has a woman in a beetroot field near his company billet will not. I mean, it's all a bit. He's imagined the beetroot field. I mean, he's painting a picture for us. The man who has a woman in the beetroot field near his company billet will not walk a mile to the battalion ET room. If a man desires to buy, exactly. If a man desires to buy his French letter in the civil shop, he should be instructed to go to a chemist shop and ask for a capote anglaise. Right? So it's all like, it couldn't be any more like normal, right? Like sensible, blah, blah, blah. There are in Lille a number of brothels which are properly inspected and where the risk of infection is practically nil. These are known to the military police, and any soldier who is in need of horizontal refreshment should be well advised to ask a policeman for a suitable address.
I think our T-shirt should be of a Tommy prostrate in a beetroot field with a Matilda in the distance and saying horizontal refreshment.
The soldier on his part must clearly understand the penalties that are attached to VD and the reasons. Finally, then I wish all unit commanders to keep in touch with the VD problem and handle it in the way they think best. We must face up to the problem, be perfectly frank about it, and do all we can to help the soldier in this very difficult matter. Signed, Major General Bernard Law Montgomery. I mean it.
Can't argue that.
Yeah, but the other.
Or can
but
you?
the thing is, the thing is, and I think he then with that memo, he published. He also with that memo, he attached a poem that he said was by someone in the regimental signals, right? And Andy Akakh asks, is this Alpha tactique for the clap? That's exactly what it is. It's devolved command. But the poem that Monty attached, right, by someone he claims was written by Cupid in the Royal Signals, right? I think he wrote this, right? Because there's just something about it. And I'll read this poem because this is right. It's not very long. It's called Mars Amatoria. The general was worried and was very ill at ease. He was haunted by the subject of venereal disease. For 44 soldiers was the tale he had to tell, had lain among the beets and loved not wisely, but too well. It was plain that copulation was a tonic for the board, but the gallant British soldier was an innocent abroad. So ere he takes his pleasure with an amateur or whore, he must learn the way from officers who've trod that path before. No kind of doubt existed in the Major General's head that the men who really knew the game of love from A to Z were his colonels and his adjutants and those above the ruck. For the higher up an officer, the better he can fuck. The colonels and the majors were not a bit dismayed. They gave orders for the holding of a unit love parade, and the adjutants by numbers showed exactly how it's done. How not to be a casualty and still have lots of fun. The adjutants explained that a capot did not mean a cup, that refreshment horizontal must be taken standing up. They told the troops to work at love according to the rules, and after digging in, to take precautions with their tools. Now the general is happy and perfectly at ease. No longer is he troubled with venereal disease. His problem solved, his soldiers clean. Their badge is now a dove. He has earned the cross of Venus, our general of love. Cupid, royal signals. Now I think he wrote that. I think he wrote that because I reckon he did. He's saying the same stuff as this memo. Beetroot fields, and I mean it's absolutely unbelievable. And you know, you can see why he might have got in trouble for that. Actually,
well, I think it's very funny. Whoever knew that Monty was a poet as well.
Well, I know. And there's
no end to his amazing skills.
Of crappy doggerel, yeah. I mean, Mary says heroes can't be rapists, remember, and as long as they were paying, they didn't think too much about the context of women. Absolutely right. But this is before the wars got started properly. The fighting has actually got rolling. So this is the BEF where they haven't got the kit to train properly. They're building defensive positions as the thing to keep them occupied. The winter's coming, so the days are getting shorter. Training's getting more and more difficult to organise. They've got this massive influx of TA soldiers that they've got to somehow fit into. They've got to somehow fit into what the BEF are doing. You know, 1st Bucks Battalion have 3 professional soldiers in the whole battalion, for instance. So that you've got this giant mass of bored blokes in uniforms. You know, and it is
feeling lusty.
Well, and it is a serious problem. And also, we're still talking about syphilis, which, after all, syphilis is the scourge of the 19th century. It's the great disease of the 19th century. Yeah. And all the officers they'll have all grown up with that in their lives and in their moral picture of the world. So I mean, it's such a weird incident, but it also just says the BEF, they're not paying attention to what's going on. They're buggering about with complaining about generals' memos and stuff rather than agitating the government for £2 and all that sort of important stuff.
Yeah, they're worrying about the minutiae.
Yeah. But then the two. But
that's because they're still stuck in a peacetime army, aren't they? Where discipline and order are more important than that's where you get your what do you call it, blimps and everything, isn't it? I mean,
and they've got them. You know, the BEF haven't got the kit in town to practice. In France to practice with. So they. Do you
remember? Do you remember that bit at the beginning of Brideshead Revisited, where Charles Ryder is an officer and he's middle aged and he's in the army and they're at a camp and they're just about to move and they've got to leave and the colonel comes round and says he finds an empty tin that they haven't tidied away and he goes, "What's this, Ryder? A tidy, an untidy camp is an untidy regiment," and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's all that kind of thing, isn't
bullshit.
It? It's sort of bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't have Terry Dillamazer Allen worrying about that kind of thing.
Now, Jim, what's that? Yeah, Alan Wicker said that in 1944 there was a sign on the road outside Naples that said "Dangerous VD here." Well, yeah, I mean the rates in we talked about this several live casts ago. The VD rates in Italy were sky high because morale was so bad and completely 3 times higher than battle casualties or whatever for hospital places.
I'm doing a whole load of stuff on all this at the moment. It's absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And actually, I was listening to Tom and Dominic one on Tolkien.
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking because I've been thinking a bit about that. I was thinking about it when I was doing Sicily. Is this the moment where the kind of the moral crusade starts to get a little bit kind of murky? You're supposed to be the good guys to kind of rid the world of evil, and yet you're blowing up cities and villages and destroying them, and you're shagging all the girls and giving them a can of tinned fruit and. And it's all just a bit murky and morally questionable, isn't it? Yeah. And I think all that, and then you're kind of blowing up the monastery, which was, the Benedictine order is all about peace You know, when you go there now, it's all rebuilt. And the first thing you see when you go through the archway is a big Pax written on in marble on the ground. And you know, it's just I think that paradox is really, really interesting, and I think it's something that doesn't really get talked about when you're talking about the war. You talk about and then they 10 Corps moved up across the Volturno or whatever, and you moved up to the Gustav line, and then there's a great big ding dong, and everyone's everyone's very depressed because they've got to go up a gully and at night, and they're being shelled by mortars. But what about the poor bloody Italians in the middle of all this? You know, what about Casino Town, which is a really pretty town before the war, before 1944, and then is 100% destroyed. I mean,
yeah.
And you're on the good side.
Well, and I think we're putting it out tomorrow. The discussion we had with James M. Scott about
yes, I mean, God, that was fascinating, wasn't it?
It was so interesting, and his book is amazing. That book is absolutely amazing. It's so his snappy writing and the because he
just writes how I want to read. Narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't put that book down. So this is a book called Black Snow that by a guy called James N. Scott, who wrote Rampage about the Philippines and the liberation of Manila or destruction of Manila, depending on your point of view. They did liberate the city.
Well, and we talked about Manila, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did a while ago.
And about the absolutely horrific.
Stuart Burbridge has just asked, does VD naturally correlate with poor morale? Yeah. Because sickness correlates with poor morale. So you're more likely to turn yourself in with venereal disease if your morale's down. But it also correlates with when people are miserable, when people have had enough.
And trust me, they were pretty miserable in Italy.
Yeah. Because they thought they were getting nowhere and all that sort of thing. But anyway, James's book is about Curtis LeMay and the firebombing of Tokyo and then everywhere else in Japan. Because that's the other thing. The other thing to remember, it is then everywhere else in Japan. Every city they can possibly hit. And the weird thing about, I mean, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they're remarkable in that they've not been struck by the B-29 force. And that book is absolutely fascinating. And that thing, there's the moment where they cross the Rubicon, basically, where LeMay puts in the first firebombing raid on Tokyo in early March of 1945 and destroys 15 square miles of the city, maybe kills 100,000 people, maybe more. They don't know.
But it's certainly not a lot less.
No, it's not a lot less. And they're counting buttons and helmets as a way of, they think 4 buttons per person. So if you find 4 buttons in the ash, that's a person, or a helmet, that's another person. That's what
it's absolutely.
It's
gut wrenching.
It's diabolical, and it
But weirdly compelling, isn't it?
But if you're worrying about moral crusades, that's where you're like, it's couched totally in terms of this is how we win the war as quickly as we possibly can. And you've elements of the US Air Force, like Hayward Hansel, who precedes LeMay commanding that bomber group or commanding that bomber force, who doesn't want to do it, who thinks you bomb
actually won't do it.
In fact, yes, and won't do it. You bomb your ball bearing factories, and
he was one of the 1930s bombermen, and he's absolutely wedded to precision daylight bombing. And nothing will change his mind about that. And it's clearly not working. It's not working at all. But one of the most amazing things about that was the weather over Japan, which I had absolutely no idea. I mean, on average, 3 days of clear skies a month in the winter of
and because
1944-45.
And because you were coming from east of Japan, you didn't know which way you didn't have the weather the way you knew the weather in Germany might be with the prevailing winds. So there's that constant advantage for the strategic bomber campaign for the British and the Americans is that basically the weather's moving east with the west with the prevailing westerlies. So you roughly know what the weather's going to be like over Europe, or, roughly. Whereas the Americans don't have that. And there's the jet stream that there's they've not accounted for at all. And
Andy and Brum, Max Hastings' nemesis does have a okay. So Max's account of the Tokyo bombing is really, really, really good.
Yeah.
But trust me, James Scott takes that to a totally different level because he's looked into it in a way that Max hasn't. I mean, Max's book is much broader. I mean, I thought Nemesis was an absolutely superb book, I've got to say. But it's really good, and Rampage was brilliant too. And the one I've just got is the War. It's called like the War Below, I think, and it's about and he follows 3 U.S. Navy submarines. And obviously, I've got a bit of a thing about U.S. Navy submarines in the Pacific these days. So I've just bought that on Kindle, so I'm looking forward to that.
Ian Pegg says, did the weather have an effect on the day the atomic bombs dropped? Well, yes, they had to.
Yeah, it did because they changed targets.
They changed targets. Yeah. They had to they had to find a gap. They had to find a gap in the cloud to get in there and drop it. I mean, it's
but talking of books, you and I are doing a thing around your book in Guildford, aren't we?
Yes, we are. On the 4th of October. 4th of
6:30 p.m. in the Electric Theatre.
In the Electric
I
Theatre.
know this because I've just literally put it in my diary tonight.
It's funny. We were discussing what to do with that in my itinerary, with the touring itinerary for next month, because we're in Brighton the next day. So it might be that basically we go to Guildford and then end up in Brighton in time for dinner after that, and a few drinks, and I don't go home. And anyway, but we're not going to dwell on that. I mean,
but what I was going to say is, if anyone's around and wants to come.
There should be
in Guildford. It's in the Electric Theatre in Guildford,
and there are tickets on Eventbrite. Andy Akak H asks, "Are the tickets?"
It is part of the Guildford Literary Festival.
Yeah.
Will there be tickets? Yeah, I think there will be.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about that bombing campaign, of course, is the atomic bomb has overshadowed it completely. In people's imaginations, and when you get to the end of that first Tokyo firestorm raid, you think, well, surely, if you're the Japanese government, you think, well, okay, game's up, can't face that again. But it doesn't seem to move the dial. It's quite extraordinary.
It's oh my god, it's just I mean this is the bleakness of 1945, isn't it? This you've got two countries which are so beaten. They're so down the Swanee, it's not true.
Yeah.
And yet they're still fighting. And it's just I think it's you have to be so careful about judging those decisions, I think.
Yeah.
Because we haven't lived through 6 years of war or 4 years of war.
And how do you get them to stop? How do you get them to surrender?
No matter what might the Russians or the Ukrainians do in 4 years' time?
Yeah.
It's still going on. You don't know. You haven't been there, so it's really. But there is no question. There's a sort of mounting terror, actually, that the war is going to go on amongst the Allied command, isn't it? This is just getting ridiculous. We've got to do something dramatic.
Well, and there's that big conference, isn't there, where they all, just before LeMay's told about the atomic bomb, just before he meets Groves, and basically all the people from Europe, the European theatre, are going, look, we bombed Germany to shit. We have destroyed their cities, and they fought on. Relentlessly. There was nothing we could do about it. They fought to the last round. It didn't matter that we completely commanded the skies. It didn't matter that we'd, obliterated their industry, their railways, and their cities. They carried on fighting, and I think that's sort of the mindset they've got in July in 1945, which is To get a glimpse into that, I mean, Will White saying that my father in the Marines in '46 is, in my opinion, alive today, and thus I'm here. I mean, it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
But
it's still absolutely horrific.
But yes, exactly.
But I do sort of feel more. I do blame the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese and Hirohito.
6 people in charge of Japan. Yeah. Basically, and the way James M. Scott puts it is he sees that that they used, the Japanese government and particularly the Emperor used the atomic bomb to change the argument domestically and go, oh, there's suddenly this new piece of technology that's that's unprecedented, so we're going to have to stop, rather than our cities are being destroyed. we can't face this anymore. I mean, the account of that first firebombing, though, is he's got people who are right. Well, but Beth, I think it's because the atomic bomb has overshadowed it. Why it's not seen in that.
I think that's part of the case, and I also think Japan's a long way away, and it's not on Europe's doorstep.
Yeah. In the end, it's
and the truth is in the historiography of the Second World War, we don't care as much about the Japanese.
Yeah.
And the war.
Yeah.
I mean, I do obviously, but
yeah.
But generally speaking, we don't. I mean, if I was to sit down and write a book now about Iwo Jima, I can tell you it wouldn't sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't sell. It wouldn't sell over here.
Yeah. I mean, I well, with that podcast, I think is up tomorrow. So, if
well, yeah, and I mean,
a bit more detail on that.
It's he does write jolly well. I'm going to go and stay with him next week, actually.
Are you?
Yeah, on Friday.
Where?
Friday night, I'm staying with him in Charleston, South Carolina. Because I'm going to the Citadel, the Military College of the South.
Are you?
Which is where all the Mark Clark papers are.
Ah.
And then I'm driving from Carlisle, from Charleston to Carlisle over the weekend, which is about 680 miles,
right,
via Bedford, Virginia,
right,
where the D-Day Memorial is.
Amazing. Yeah. Wow.
But anyway, we've really
What are you looking for in Mark? What are you looking for in Mark Clark's papers?
Well, I've got his diaries, but there's a whole load of other stuff. I just want to get under his. I just want to find out more about him. I just want to know. I want to get. I just think he's such an interesting person because he's got overall such a bad press.
Yeah.
And yet, I'm just not sure he deserves it. He was obviously a bit of a knob. And, he's obviously difficult and tricksy.
Yeah.
And, he's a bit highly strung and all those kind of things. But actually, he's pretty fearless. And I think the big things he gets right. I mean, it's really interesting. We're sort of starting to look into the Rapido slaughter of the 36th Texans. So I've got this account by this guy who was a tank battalion commander, and they're all lined up behind them, and they're just saying, "When do you want us to fire?" And they never get asked to get involved. And the best way to destroy the German machine guns on the other side, on the floodplain, on the other side of the Rapido, is to blast them with Shermans, and they're just out there, just going, "Tell me when you want to fire," and they never fire. They just don't get involved. They're waiting there. Fred Ward has been told that they're there, and no one ever calls upon them. That's got nothing to do with Mark Clark.
That's all very.
So what's going on? Really strange.
God.
No. So it's all this stuff is there's the Italy campaign. I think more than any other part of the Second World War is suffused with a load of bollocks myths which don't stand up at all, from the whole kind of order that British troops were to be shot if they entered Rome. It's just absolute horseshit. And people like Alan Wicker, absolutely all they do is just perpetuate this crap. And it's just nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of stuff which I'm coming across now where I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's a bit.
Well, it's the thing you were saying the other day that you think Avalanche is
it's
actually
insane.
It's bananas, and it goes quite well, really.
Yeah, I mean they're facing overwhelming numbers of German divisions who are on the defense, in defensive positions overlooking the beaches. By all accounts they should win, and they don't. Yeah. So they're getting something right, aren't they? Yeah. Anyway, so you read your Monty chapter, and how far have you got?
Well, we just finished Slim, so Slim's transformation.
Oh, great.
Or Slim. I mean, Slim is so fortunate in his military career. He's so lucky. He is so lucky that he's not involved in the Arakan campaign in 43. He is so lucky.
He's so lucky that he's not taken to task for actual cock-ups that he did make in Abyssinia.
Yeah. He's so fortunate, and he's wounded in the East African Force, and he's sent back to India as put on the staff. He comes to Iraq on the staff, and then he takes the place of someone who's been taken ill, and he just sort of basically, is very fortunate to not have any of them. None of the misfortune of 42 sticks to him. None of it, of all the things that go wrong. And I mean, and it's very interesting. I think the army does quite an interesting thing after 1942. After that, it's a 1,000-mile retreat. Their officers are completely outclassed, and everybody is. Everyone gets hung up on. We've got to hold Rangoon, so they hold Rangoon, but they don't. But what they ought to do is defeat the Japanese. Rangoon doesn't matter. Defeat the Japanese. Don't hold Rangoon. Defeat the Japanese army. Find it, encounter it, destroy it. That's what you've got to do. Not hang on to Rangoon and then have to give Rangoon up, and then have to extract yourself. All that's going on, and Alex is up to his neck in all this, and yet the army afterwards goes. The army knows afterwards. It says to itself, Indian Army essentially, and the British Army says to itself, you know what? There's nothing we could have done about any of that. Burma Army's wasn't ready. Indian Army levies, they weren't ready. Didn't have any automatic weapons. There's basically nothing we could do about that. And so the very first thing Slim does when all the men are coming out, he goes, "You fought brilliantly. You never lost your coherence. You're all amazing," because he doesn't want the defeat to sit on the men, because he knows that if he does, he'll never shift it. He'll never ever break that voodoo. And I think that's very, very interesting. And Cowan and people like that are involved in all this. And it doesn't stick to them either. It's not until 43 where the army, where you've the likes of Irwin who are trying to then create the pace and dictate the pace and take the war to the Japanese, and he makes such.
But he's also trying to fight. He's also trying to fight a symmetrical battle, isn't he? And an asymmetrical landscape and all that kind of crap. Yeah. But I mean, there's a division that has something like 14 battalions in it or something at one point.
Yeah. But Irwin,
or one corps. No, one corps that has 14 battalions.
Yeah. But what's
they're
interesting?
Just throwing them one after another.
14 frontal attacks on a battalion level attacks.
Dog.
Yeah, and you've got that whole thing of a properly dug in Japanese platoon can hold up a brigade because it's got its fields of fire so well worked out. It's got its artillery ranged on everything. It's got its artillery ranged on itself in case the Duke soldiers do get into the Japanese positions. They've got it all. They got it all figured out. But what's interesting is Irwin then does carry the can, and is fired. Tries to get Slim.
Tries to blame it all on Slim because Slim comes in as an advisor. He gets brought in. He's been doing training. And they come and say, "Can you just observe and see what's going on and draw a report?" So he does and says, "I think this is all wrong." Yeah. Owen then tries to get him fired. Owen gets fired in turn. Yeah. And he's made acting commander. Of the Eastern Army. Yeah. And that's when he has his great thoughts in that amazing house at Barrack Fort.
But it's extraordinary though that the army knows in the end where the blame lies in 42, which is at the end of 1941, they're told in Burma that there's no danger of invasion. You'll find that you really oughtn't to worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the state of the Burma army. You're fine. It's all right. They're not going to be coming through there. They're like the imperialism power vibes coming out of Singapore are enough to deter the Japanese. Is basically what strategy is at this point. And I think it's really interesting that Slim has the good fortune to sort of sidestep some of the sackings and demotions or whatever, or basically, he could have just been flicked into training, because that's what happens. You're never quite fired. You take on this training place, old chap. And he managed his good fortune. And then I think what's really, really interesting is, the Battle of the Sittang Bend in 45 is a Slim battle. It's just he's not there. That they've got it so well worked out the last victory in that's a very good.
That's
question.
a great question. That's a brilliant question.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Monty, good luck.
Yes.
Freiburg, good luck because he didn't get fired and he had political backing. That's the next thing. Wingate, excellent luck, really, until his luck completely ran out, obviously. Slim, excellent luck.
Oh no, this plane is coming down.
Tuca had good luck. I mean,
Yeah, bad luck as well.
yeah, but he, he had the
with his
arthritis. Yeah,
arthritis and his recurring malaria and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, but he had the good fortune to be allowed to command his division his way and all that sort of stuff. I mean, such an interesting and he's he is such an interesting man. I mean, I love
him. I love him.
Edward says, did they have good luck or make their own luck? You can only make your own luck to an extent, I think, in that game. That very, very
All
often.
That's what I know.
Yeah. All specs. All
specs.
John Helland are Tuca's two pseudonyms, pen names for when he's writing in between the wars. And
because otherwise he knew that he'd never get spoken to again in the mess.
Yeah.
But Quetta would be out.
Yeah, they knew who it was anyway. I mean, that's the thing. It's obviously Tuca. Well, yeah, I think Wakeman, luck is when preparation is opportunity. Nice. I think so, but I think Slim's sheer luck in having avoided. He did make a terrible mess of things at the start of the war, and he
was long way away and people didn't see it. And
he was wounded, so it's sort of it cut both ways. But yeah, I mean, Tuca, and then Wingate. I mean, Wingate had extraordinary luck, and he was brilliant. I mean, the thing about Wingate that I think gets overlooked is he was brilliant at networking. He was an absolutely fantastic, clearly brilliant at sitting you down and looking you in the eye and talking you into his way of seeing things. Absolutely brilliant at it.
I know no one else has a beard, but I'm going to get away with it.
Exactly, it's exactly that. I know no one else does their O groups in the nude, but the men will think that it will add to my mystery. It's all that. But he was obviously brilliant at bending Wavell's ear, at using the patronage he had, at carving out a reputation of space for himself. Because after all, in Palestine, because he sides with the Zionists, his career really ought to have stopped there. He picked a side in the insurgency in Palestine before the war. There's no way his career should have survived that, but it did because Wavell liked him, and he must have.
The inspiration of General Gordon, I think, is really persuasive.
Oh, he's Kitchener and he's Kitchener and he's definitely Gordon.
Gordon, I think it's more Gordon than Kitchener because Gordon's an
messianic
man, and messianic and all that kind of stuff, and driven by a kind of the moral compunction and all this kind of stuff, and going out on a limb and
but it's also
quite eccentric.
But it's also Kitchener because what you do is you do a column and you go and bash the other side of
Nicola Hooray goes answering the questions is going as well as normal.
But it's also
Wingate was a wang, exactly.
Well, exactly. But you do a Gordon, but Kitchener was applying the colonial method of sending a column up, and he had gunboats helping him with better technology. And I think Wingate thought, well, with air power, we've got that's our technological edge, so we'll do things that way.
Yeah.
But in the jungle, critical as in the desert, as what goes wrong at Gazala, critical mass is incredibly important. You can't do flying columns that deliver critical mass. You're too big. You're too big to move quickly, and you're too small to deliver a proper bloody nose. The fact
like Dieppe, right?
Yeah, or penny packets in the desert in Gazala in early 42.
Yeah. Another one thing or another.
Yeah. And you don't have the strength to counterattack.
No.
And you don't have the punch to defend yourself either. So you basically you can be written down by an enemy by the enemy treating you piecemeal, which is the situation which is what Rommel does to the Gazala line in May of 42 is he deals with each bit as he wants, picks them off, wears them down, and they're all too small and too far apart to counterattack on each other's behalf and protect each other.
That's a good question.
Well, I think Rommel would have made an excellent American general if fate had blown in a different direction.
He'd have been brilliant in Burma, wouldn't he?
It'd have been pretty good. Yeah. Yeah. Although, again, logistics weren't the thing on his mind, were they? Which is after all.
But they became so. I think he learned important lessons. I think the idea, the point is, these people don't stand still.
Yeah.
So Rommel absolutely gets logistics by Normandy, but by then it's too late.
Yeah.
But he doesn't in the summer of 1942.
That's because he's learned his lesson as well.
Yeah, of course. But this is
heavily
my point.
illustrated.
But that's why Slim makes mistakes in Abyssinia.
Yeah.
And where he can in Ethiopia, where he can get away with it because it's away from the kind of public glare. And he learns something and gets better. I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Waitman says professionals know logistics. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Rommel did have great desert goggles, DD, but he nicked them off Dick O'Connor, didn't he? Or was it Neem? I can't remember.
Yeah, he did. Pinch
I think they were Dick O'Connor's. They're British anyway. Those goggles.
But Tuca's so interesting because he's an intellectual, which is so reading his books operate on a different level to a lot of those sort of it was a jolly good show memoirs. He writes in that vernacular, but he's writing about something else. The way he writes about fighting, and in particular the theoretical books after the war, where he's basically being Auspex or John Helland again, where Pattern of War.
When one looks at the Battle of Kenai,
yeah, exactly. Genghis Khan had taught us everything we could possibly know about mobile warfare.
Hannibal at Trasimeno.
Yeah, it's all that.
It's all that kind of stuff. It's great. So if you could have sit down for dinner with three of them,
well, you'd have to eat a raw onion with Ord Wingate, wouldn't you? I'd want to see what he was like.
You want to get the colour of his jib.
Well, you want to see if he would hypnotize me. You know what I mean? Would he be able to work his sort of mongoose magic on me? I don't know, because he was obviously one of those. He was a Marmite guy, so there are plenty of people who weren't persuaded by him, including Joe Lentaigne and people like that. Who didn't buy it, who didn't buy into his sort of messianic look me in the eyes stuff. That Richard Rose James writes about in Chindit. That he would come and he'd fix you with his glare and all that sort of stuff.
Look me in the eye, look me in the eye, look me in the eye.
Exactly. I persuade you that this is the right way to do things. And I think that's
3, 2, 1, you're back in the room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think I'd go, Wingate. I mean, it'd be great to except Snog, marry, avoid. I think I'd have, yeah.
The version I know is Shag, Marry, Clip, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
That's just a polite way of doing it.
I don't know. Wingate. I'd like to meet Peter White. I mean, I haven't read that chapter out loud yet.
That was my favourite chapter in the book, I've got to say.
But that's all thanks to Andy Akak Aitchison.
Well, it's
Peter White stuff.
It's fantastic. The Hobart chapter is really good as well.
Yeah. And the more I think about that, the more I think that's a I've really struck on something there, and because 79th Armored Division are in every battle. They're present at every battle after D-Day.
Yeah.
One way or another.
And D-Day.
From D-Day onwards.
Yeah.
They're basically present at everything, and they're there, and so what they're obviously brilliant at is turning up and saying, right, what do you need us to do? And they're brilliant at integrating with people they've never worked with before, never met before. And, in Brothers in Arms, you wrote a lot about, if the Sherwood Rangers were working with infantry they'd worked with before, things would run smoothly. The colonels would understand each other at regimental and battalion level, and things would chime along nicely. But 79th Armored are having to do that all the time because they're there for plugging in, you know. And what's so interesting is that when people are, you know, when the division, because the division's the last to be raised, and they're going to wind it down, and then they Waitman is pushing back on the cruel sea a little, I see. But when the 79th Armored Division's raised, it's the last division to be raised, and they're going to wind it down. And then Brooks thinks, hang on a minute, let's repurpose it. Let's use it for this specialized armor task, and gets Hobart in, and Hobart starts, you know, talking about what he can do. And I think that's really interesting. But all the people being brought into 79th Armored, they're all going, I want a Swan. I'm a breakthrough tank guy. I'm a cavalryman. I don't want to do this. And he has lots of griping from people who don't want to.
How do they keep the morale going in 79th Division?
Well, by training them really, really, really intensely. By training them.
20 seconds to go, Western's going.
Yeah. Brilliant. By training them really intensely, creating their own way of doing things, and getting them bloody good at what they're meant to be doing. But basically, these are all people who think they're going to be involved in some sort of massive swanning breakout, and none of them are. They have in 43 to the end of the year, by which time they're starting to develop the machinery and develop the ways of using it, figure out what the tasks are on the beaches and all that sort of stuff. You know, that you've got tank men going, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a sapper, my job isn't, you know, clearing minefields, thank you very much. I'm a cavalryman. And they have this stuff going on. And Hobart is somehow, because Hobart is also a my way or a highway guy. He's
right.
You know, you could, if you argued with him and presented your case, he would put up with you, or he would like you, but you had to fight your corner. And if you didn't think your face fit, you were gone. So there's that about him too. But I think it's just, I think he's so interesting because, and you know, in York, I found that little picture of doodles of 79th Armored Division logos, right? I sent you this picture, right? Because it's the face of a bull, right? And the bull's face. So in the book, we've got the bull's face, and I as the caption for the photo said, if you put spectacles on the bull, it looks like Hobart, doesn't it? Right? And in this cartoon that was at the York Army Museum, there's a picture of a bull with spectacles on, and it says, "Do great works reflect the likeness of their creator?" So it's a thing they were saying at the time.
That's really funny.
The men in 79th Armored, and I think he's really, really interesting, and I think he completely indicates the future of armor. He says what the future of armor is, that it's got to be, that it'll never work if it's not completely integrated. It'll never work unless it's part of the whole. You know, that he takes the combined arms thing to its logical conclusion, I think. And that's what's really interesting. And like I say, they're in every battle. And you can't have you can't do your breakout without your breakthrough. And he's the breakthrough guy. He's the safe cracker, not the getaway driver.
Well, certainly, I remember the 84 rail splitters were pretty impressed by those flails and particularly the crocodiles.
Yeah.
When they were at Gardenkirchen.
Yeah.
You know, they all just I mean, you can tell these new guys who've just arrived, you know, the previous month. Suddenly they're in action all this mud, and they're seeing this thing coming up, and they're just going, "Holy smoke! Look at that!"
Yeah. And I think the issue is that when you know that because of the fact that there are funnies and that you've got these tanks for D-Day, that's how the story gets told, that they're part of the sort of D-Day preparations. They're sort of the groovy stuff for D-Day. But you know, crocodiles and the Avery with the flying dustbin and all those kind of, you know, those sort of close support tank stuff that stays in that basically stays in the line. And like I say, every single time they're called up, they have to go in, they have to liaise with the people they're put with immediately. They have to integrate, they have to fit into the tactical systems that the infantry are using. And I think that's really interesting. It's a hell of a thing to have pulled off, especially as by then he's too old and he's supposedly, a 1930s Liddell Hart tank man
Yeah.
who believes in massive tank armies and breakouts and all this sort of stuff.
But he's not. He's a complete progressive.
No, he's very unusual because he's capable of changing his thinking, even
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
He's been part of the development of. He sees that you need to think past that, and I think that indicates, and again we come back to Brooks' ability to spot that in him and to trust him with the task is very interesting, because he was on the tank committees in 41 with Churchill and the Armored Division commanders, where they were talking about how do we actually do this. Well, Paul Royal asks, how does Hobart in a leading innovation fit in with a my way or highway approach? Well, because if you argued with him and you made your case, you became part of his way, so you didn't have to take the highway. You became part of how you did things. And he often had this thing where he had his REME guys developing stuff for him that he'd then take to industry, because he'd go to industry and say, we need a thing like this, and the people in industry would suck their teeth and say that's impossible, can't do that. So he'd get the REME to develop it, and then he'd have it manufactured, which I think is very interesting. So you've got that sort of porous boundary between the army and industry, and the people actually using the kit, the people servicing the kit, and then the people making it. I mean, it's really, he is so interesting. And, after the war, basically he's shuffled out of the army. Thanks very much. That's enough innovation.
Yeah. Go back to your pointy stick.
Well, he decides, and he decides he's going to become a historian, and it doesn't work out. And then he dies of cancer not long after the war. And it's an interesting...
Yeah, when did he die?
I think sort of 1951, something like that. Can't remember. But basically, he sort of fades. He sort of like so many.
He's there, and he's such a big person. And then suddenly,
it's a bit like
over, and it's just the end of it.
Well, it's a bit like the end of the Lord of the Rings. He fades and goes to the west, to the way the elves do.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we need to get Andy on to talk about Peter White, because he really knows.
Master King.
Yeah, he really knows it inside out, and I know he's watching. And we were talking today about it. So about getting him on. So that's something we need to arrange in the next few days. Around
I shall be in touch shortly.
Yeah, around your schedule, Jim, and my schedule, which is
ACAC schedule, obviously.
An ACAC schedule, of course. He's not just sat by the phone. He's not just sat at his laptop waiting for the Zoom.
He has got other things to do. I still, out of all the people in your book, I'd still want to have lunch with, dinner with Chica more than anyone else. I just think it'd be so interesting. He'd be so opinionated. I'd just love to pick his brains about it. I'd love to talk about North Africa and India before the war, and then Casino and stuff, and how you'd have done things. And I'd love to say to him, okay, Northwest Europe, what would you have done differently?
That's interesting.
How would you know? It'd just be so interesting, because of course he'll have an opinion on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he does. He talks about what he'd have done in
yes, and how stodgy
some of those letters with Maloney and things.
Yeah, and how stodgy it all is. And the great, he calls him the Great Monty, doesn't he? He doesn't like him.
No, he does not at all.
One bit. I mean, but he does say in approach to battle. No, it's approach to battle. He says, in war, administration is as much a matter of hard work and improvisation as of skill. Whereas to fight a successful land battle against a formidable enemy is, I believe, the most difficult of all skilled achievements. What does the civilian historian really know about it? So you'd have an interesting...
What was that other amazing line we got from him? And we were going to turn that into a T-shirt and then didn't.
Oh, sledgehammer to crack a nut is one of those. You don't take a fly swat. What you don't try and you don't try and swat a fly with something when you could use a sledgehammer.
It's right here. It's on my shelf of repeatedly go-to books.
Yeah, it's a really good book. One doesn't take a fly swat. I can't remember what it is. To swat a cow or something.
I've got to find it. I've got it in here somewhere.
Or a hornet.
Something about hornet.
Gary McMahon has just asked. Last week you spoke about a Chelsea pensioner commando telling about the Fallschirmjäger in Italy. I think his name was Roy or Fred. I can't remember. It was years ago. It was also the same day I met our outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson. That was an interesting afternoon. Right, yeah. Yes, that was a very interesting afternoon. Because that was the London cabs thing where they were taking people to veterans to Normandy and Arnhem. And he was mayor of London at the time, and he turned up and wouldn't stop talking. And I was just like, could you shut up? I'm trying to listen to this bloke. Is this bloke telling me about the Fallschirmjäger and all that? Like, shut up. Shut up, mate.
Oh, dear. He didn't know a lot about Churchill. I don't forget to say, isn't it amazing that Churchill had double the number of words in his brain, in the English language, in his vocabulary than anywhere else? Isn't that the most remarkable thing? And he went, remarkable, absolutely remarkable, remarkable. And everyone laughed. And that was that.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Oh, where is that line? I'm not going to find it.
Doug Jackson says, weren't you? Doug's just said, weren't you at Oxford with Boris? No, I was not. And in fact, that's how part of the conversation went. So because I remember my first term, I went over to the Oxford Union, which is the debating society, who famously said they wouldn't fight for king or country in 1934, whenever it was.
Yeah.
And it was so brimful of wankers, that place. I thought, well, I'm not going back there. But every term, they vote for a new union president. And the candidate that term was Michael Gove, right? Anyway, so that's the backdrop. So I meet Boris at this thing, and he comes over and he goes, were you and I at some bar at Oxford together? And I said, at the same time? I said, no, absolutely not. No,
you're a bit older than me, chum.
No, I wasn't. You're older than I am. I was there, 87 to 90. So, but Michael Gove was running for president. Ah, yes, Govey. Yes, Govey. I bloody made him. That's what he said.
Is that what he said?
I made all those buggers. But anyway,
wow.
And it was, and we've got a photo somewhere downstairs of me with a look, sat in a black cab in the door of the black cab with the look of, would you please shut up on my face? But
that's really good. That's really good. We've got a picture of Ned walking across the Chalk Valley History Festival site with Boris, and it looks like Ned is putting him in his place. It's really funny.
Oh, excellent. Well, I mean,
Ned is clearly doing the talking.
He's been
most impressed at.
Put in his place, evidently. The pub landlord does not do impressions. Just want that to point out. He never does. Never. He just never does do impressions. But you can't find that quote, can you?
I can't. It's really, really bugging me. We got some. I don't know whether John was working on trying to show a couple of films, but whether he's got the.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Or not, I'm not sure.
I'll tell you what. Should we? I met Gove at a thing once. Yeah, I met Gove as well. At a thing.
I met Gove a couple of times. He was very nice when I met him.
Lord's Taverners. He was very Right. What have we got? Have we got the films? Brilliant. The Fall of Catania, ladies and gentlemen. Play.
Woo! Catania on August the 5th, less than a month after the first Allied landings in Sicily. The city fell into our hands as a result of bold tactics which left the enemy with but two alternatives, departure or death. He preferred to get out. Thus, our advanced troops met little opposition as they entered the town. The retreating enemy had mined most of the roads leading to Catania, but the Royal Engineers carried out the exceedingly dangerous sweeping operations for which they are famous, and the roads were soon safety lanes once more.
Look at that beautiful machine.
Beautiful carrier. Look at that.
Beautiful carrier. Beautiful.
Our troops were not yet certain whether any Germans remained in town, so they proceeded with caution until they were assured by the Italian population that they have done it a bunk. Much evidence of the heavy bombing by the RAF met our men as they passed through the streets.
There you go. This is what I'm talking about. Look at
Jesus, that. Look at the state of that.
Oh, no. I would not be happy having to wear shorts.
No.
The sudden freedom from the yoke of dictatorship went to the heads of some of the Sicilians who indulged in an orgy of looting. They engaged in free fights for possession of the few trifling articles left by the fleeing Germans. The local police were helpless, but British troops soon restored order. Out of Catania's normal population of 250,000, only 1/5 remained when our boys entered the town. Make way for the fella with the umbrella. Hope he keeps fine for it.
Isn't that great?
Crowds were very anxious to prove their friendliness, and many a Tommy had to submit to being
strong.
kissed
That's
on
what I
both
want.
cheeks.
White Scout collar.
Our reception in Catania seems to prove that the Italians want us in their land, for that way lies peace, and they know it.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. What?
When you look at all that carnage.
A simple, here's a sartorial question. Some of those fellas are wearing trousers, others are wearing shorts. How does that?
Yeah, it's just different battalions and different. I've never quite got to the bottom of it, but it's just such a bad idea wearing shorts.
Yeah.
Because you get sunburned, and if you get scratched, it can go septic, and you're more likely to get scratched if you're not wearing shorts. If you're wearing shorts rather than trousers.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was doing my Jack Tanner novels, Jack Tanner would never wear shorts for that reason. Also, it's just a shit look, isn't it?
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's sort of weirdly prep school. It's not good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
the little skinny little knees and everything.
I mean, Catania got it lightly, relatively speaking, didn't it? And yet, those pictures, it's completely smashed up, isn't it?
Oh no, he's completely smashed. It hit like something like 73 times it's bombed or something like that. Messina's sort of 87 or something. I mean, it's just absolutely horrendous. This is the point I was making. You know, it's if you're the good guys, why are you kind of destroying all the cities?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's obviously it's not. You know, it's not as simple as that, but it starts posing some really, really interesting questions, I think.
Yeah. Well, and
yeah,
and also, you know, after all, we're trying to think how to frame this best. Is because we and some of this is coloured by your chat with Philippe, actually, because we, you know, look back at the Second World War. It's a good war. We did the right thing. We were the right people doing the right thing and all that. When you trip over where we're not really, you could argue we're not doing, we're doing it for the right reasons, but we're not necessarily doing the right thing. It gets quite tricky, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because then you get into the thing with that Philippe was talking about, where we're not doing the right thing and we're doing it for the wrong reasons. And you think that are these fine lines?
Gassing the dogs. I mean,
okay,
God, I just when he was saying, and you know, how do you think they killed them? It just hadn't occurred to me. It just had not occurred to me at all.
Yeah.
Really, really hadn't.
Yeah.
It's funny because that wasn't strictly Second World War, but there was lots of. But it was sort of relevant. That was the point.
Well, it was because after all, there'd have been no law. You know, they wouldn't have been breaking any laws and international conventions if those conventions hadn't been established by the events of the Second World War in reaction to the events of the Second World War, would they? I mean, that's the thing.
He is very keen to do the walk.
Oh yeah. Oh, the rat line
on Vector. The rat line walk.
Oh, we've got lots of walks to do this year. We've got to do the Freedom Trail over the Pyrenees as well.
Yeah, we've got to do that. Some stuff to do. Are we gonna? There was also the liberation of Naples. I don't know whether John can stretch to that one or whether
we got a piece of video.
One build's enough. Yeah, no, it's a good one, and obviously that's a little bit longer. That's a little bit later. It's at the very end of September. So it's you know, nearly 2 months later.
Yeah.
But yeah, here we go.
Comes.
Allies enter Naples.
General Montgomery and General Clark conferred on plans which are to bring
together
the Allied
at last.
Assault on Naples. With Monte's warriors plunging forward up the Adriatic coast, the Anglo-American 5th gathers momentum for the capture of Naples. Enemy snipers posted at windows and on rooftops are searched out by British infantrymen on the outskirts of the town of Carver.
Who was that running across the street with a beret on?
Mortars are brought up to deal with machine gun posts and strong points.
I mean, Jesus, it's a horror story, isn't it? Oh, yeah, a little bit more destruction.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
Having successfully fought its way over the mountains into the plains of Naples, the 5th streams on through towns and villages. This is Nocera on the road to Pompeii. In Castellamare Harbour, sunken ships add to the general destruction, while blown bridges over the canal tell of German efforts to delay our advance.
It's carnage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Vesuvius smoulders in the background, while a broadside from a squadron of Sherman tanks is sent into the German lines.
Interesting finish.
Yeah,
Simon.
look at that. I like that.
As the German rearguards move out, our columns swiftly enter. 3.7s rushed forward to engage their massed forces, drawing steadily away.
That's the rather implying they're using them in an anti-tank role, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the early morning, British and American units making their final drive on Naples, entering the town of Scafati. Civilians begin to pop out of every building to demonstrate with cheers and hand claps. The rarest thing in Italy today is a fascist salute, or for that matter, a fascist. Where they've gone to, and once there were 7 million of them, is a mystery.
Yeah, they weren't cheering for long, that's for sure. Where's the health and safety guy in his high-vis jacket ahead of the tank?
These RAF film unit pictures are being sent in to make the German retreat as difficult and costly as possible. American Mitchells, leaving Naples behind them, make heavy and concentrated raids on the northern exits from the city.
That just looks really quite ineffective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Troop concentrations and roads are pounded thoroughly. The absence of German fighter protection was a depressing influence on the Nazis. They had to rely almost wholly on ground defenses to counter the weighty Allied air attacks.
Paul, those are 3.7-inch anti-aircraft guns, those artillery pieces. So that's why they have a sort of superficial resemblance to 88s. They're much heavier. It's the thing we fired every night.
Actually, they're hitting that road quite effectively, aren't they?
Emerged from a large tunnel in the mountains, the only pass which cuts through the range.
I mean, why didn't they blow that tunnel? Amateurs.
A line of vehicles waiting to enter Pompeii. Italy's celebrated sightseeing spot for tourists has an influx of visitors which eclipses all previous records.
Oh, lovely honey.
Yeah, that's not
Looking towards the famous ruins, which, except for an odd shell crater or two, look just as knocked about as they have for hundreds of years.
I mean, Pompeii was quite badly bombed.
Yeah.
Resting place of 3 British war correspondents at Scafati. The graves of Sale, Austin and Mundy, killed by a shell fired from a German tank. British forces coming upon an Axis concentration camp released hundreds of anti-fascist Italians and German Jews. First people to be freed from the horrors of internment under dictator rule. For 3 years, this mixed community had suffered semi-starvation and ill usage. While life there was not to be compared with German concentration camps, the internees were subjected to many indignities. Czechs, Poles, Yugoslavs, Negroes, and Chinese were numbered among them. Our first consideration was food. Rations were issued, and those things which had been denied them made available by their liberators. The sorrows of 3 years of torment were partially dispelled by kindness, which for them had vanished with the years. Many firm friendships had been formed in the camp. Here are 2 families taking leave of each other as they separate to start new lives. A young Jewish couple had been married in the camp where they met. No more will they have to face the future with fear. The threat of persecution no longer hangs over them. One of the 4 freedoms is theirs. Havoc created in Naples has been greatly added to by demolition and destruction carried out by the Germans.
Jesus.
This is the ruined front door into the city. British
Wow.
troops were the first to enter. The biggest prize yet to fall to the Allies in this campaign. They swarmed into the city and out again with
French
scarcely a
tank,
pause, leaving other forces coming up behind to complete the occupation. Two young Germans, little more than boys,
The
were
82nd
rounded up by
Airborne guy.
Italians and handed over.
Yeah.
Bordering on tears, the juvenile Nazis must feel that the world's against them.
The juvenile Nazis.
On reaching the center of the city, thousands of shouting, hysterical people started to swarm around the lorries, tanks, and cars. It was the start of an amazing scene. In a short while, many streets were jammed tight with a howling, cheering, weeping mob. Here's a press car snowed up under an avalanche of wildly excited Neapolitans. See Naples and die from laryngitis.
It's amazing footage,
This is
isn't
Italy's
it?
second most important city in the year of good gracious me, 1943.
Wow.
That's that I mean, well, yeah, they were kids, weren't they? I mean, that's 43. Though. I mean, are they Germans that young at that point? Have they reached that point, or are they?
I don't know what's going on there. They didn't look like Germans. They looked like Italians to me.
Either way, very young. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, they could have been Italians in German police battalions, that kind of thing.
yeah. It's a me, Mario. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that footage is amazing because, I mean, Shermans everywhere, which is interesting because you tend to forget that you know that they're everywhere in Italy, aren't they? And a priest, and but the thing that's really striking about that is the place has been smashed up, right? Smashed
Big
to
time.
pieces, and Italy is poor anyway, is on its arse anyway.
Yeah.
It's a poor country, and certainly in the south, and it's been smashed up. How long does it take Naples and its surroundings to recover? You know, for the infrastructure to be fixed and all that. I mean,
Well, it takes ages, and that's half the problem. That's the problem with Naples. You know, this is the problem with the people, for all the civilians. You know, it's one of the most densely populated cities in Europe. And there just isn't anything, you know, because as the Germans retreated, they've bust everything. So, you know, there's no electricity, there's no running water, you know, all the kind of things which are part of normal life have just gone, just like that. And they're impoverished anyway. There did seem to be quite a lot of young men, but actually there weren't there weren't many of the kind of 20 to 30-year-olds. You know, a lot of those are in the armed forces and they're in prison camps in Britain or Canada or wherever. Or already been rounded up by the Germans by this point. So there aren't a lot. And you know, where the women are supposed to, how they're supposed to sort of provide for their families. You know, where do you get food from? There isn't anything because, you know, the railways have been, it's like 87% of all railway carriages have been destroyed.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's 90% of all trucks have been destroyed. So even if you did have stuff, there's no means of getting it in to and from. So food supplies just aren't getting into the city.
Yeah.
And then the Allies turn up. And yes, they've got lots of tin cans, and everyone's thinking, well, how am I going to make a living? How am I going to get my children to survive? So they prostitute themselves, which is why, you know, the chief medical officer of the Fifth Army reckons there's, you know, what is it, 50% of all available women have got VD by the summer of 1944. I mean, it's absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
It's horrific. And also, the when it comes to Allied military government, you know, a lot of this has been planned by people in Algiers, which was Allied headquarters. You know, and they're desk swallowers and, you know, clever people and all the rest of it. But they haven't been to Italy before. They don't really know what to expect. Yeah. So there's also a little bit of vindictiveness that comes into it because, after all, the Italians started it on the 10th of June and got it coming and all the rest of it. And they're all kind of, you know, they're itais. You know, they're collective noun. You know, they're not individuals with individual stories and individual tragedies and struggles. They're a mass. Yeah. And so, you know, the exchange rate is set ridiculously high. So then there's just rampant inflation. Yeah. And then there's our good friend Vito Genovese and Charles Pilotti from Palermo gets promoted and then becomes the head of civil affairs in Naples, and so the racket continues. And by the spring of 1944, Vito Genovese's got the whole thing completely nailed, and he's running the black market. Yeah, and making, you know, lives even more miserable. I mean, it is. I mean, you know, your Italy's sorrow, to kind of phrase the sort of Italy's
Italy's appalling fate in all this, in that you've got this fascist government that knows perfectly well it can't fight a first-class opponent in the Second World War, but joins in anyway, gets itself into
not expecting to have to do that.
Well, and not expected to have to do that. Yeah,
that's the calculation. The calculation is that Britain is defeated, so therefore it's going to be easy pickings.
Yeah,
got that one wrong.
Yeah,
I'm increasingly of the opinion that one of the greatest achievements of the Second World War was the air defence system of Great Britain that was set up from 1938 to 40.
The Dowding system.
The Dowding system, yeah.
Ooh, maybe we should do a podcast about that.
Oh, shall we? I don't think we've ever mentioned it before. But I really think I do. Yeah, but I know we said it's all incredibly important and all the rest of it. But actually, I think it's so important because no one else has done it.
Yeah,
and it completely cocks up all German plans.
Now, I've been actually since we talked about the Dowding system. We did that podcast. The question that came to me, thinking about it, is what could the Germans have done about it? They didn't know anything about it, did they? They hadn't got their heads around it. Because after all, the Dowding system.
No, they send those Zeppelins over.
Yeah. But they don't know about it, and it's in integrated form. They don't.
And they get scrambled, and they get the jam, don't they?
They certainly don't know that squadrons are being rotated in groups and all that, around the groups and all that sort of stuff. And basically you're keeping a reserve in up your sleeve and all that. They don't know anything about it.
No, not clear.
And that actually that. So much a huge advantage the British have, although they've got this thing in place, is the fact that the Germans are really all over the place in the summer of 1940. They haven't prepared for any of this stuff they're going to do. Even though, as you said, we talked about before, that the bomber arm is seen as the attacking arm. They are about bombing and they are about strategic bombing, but they've not accounted for a thing like the Dowding system in any of their planning, have they?
No.
And so they
not at all. And the intelligence brief, the blue paper or whatever it's called, that Beppo Schmidt prepares in the middle of July 1940, it's just total cock and bull. I mean, it's we should go through it one of these days and pick it out and go through it, because it's and just trash it, because it's just absolute cock.
Yeah.
I think it's issued in full in the narrow margin. Yeah, not so narrow margin.
Well, I've got the Dowding's Dispatch. I've got Andy Saunders' book. It's right up there in front of me on one of my shelves. That's worth looking at too, because that's Dowding taking control of the historiography within months of the thing finishing. And that's
we run Andy that conversation with Andy. Is that
about Stukas? I don't know. Not sure. Anyway, that is pretty much all we got time for, isn't it, James?
It is. Can I just show you my turtle?
Yeah, your Mark III.
Mark III.
Is it the real deal, or is it a Belgian copy? Because apparently the Belgian copies are what you've got to watch out for.
Looks real to me, but what do I know? I've got it on eBay, so it must be right. I'm quite pleased with it, actually.
That's very nice. Yeah, very nice bit of kit.
I just found it was a missing piece in my collection.
Yeah.
AD won't be impressed by that, though, because it's not home front.
No, he likes his home front stuff, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. Next year we have Wastefest. We need to get in there.
Yes, we have Wastefest as well as an.
We need to have the stall, and we need to have AD and George doing a talk in the. In the
Arsenal.
The third one.
The Arsenal. Yeah. Anyway, as Goalhanger has just said at 1 minute past 10. Thanks for joining, everyone. We will see you soon. Tomorrow it's James M. Scott, and then the podcast just keep on coming. We'll see you soon. I see people around and about gigs. I am coming up to Sunderland, so maybe a trip to Northeast Models with Waitman and Simon Red 5 might be on the cards. That'd be fun.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah. That sounds fun.
Anyway, see you all soon. Und gute Nacht.
Adios.